Okay.
Morning.
Now, today we like to discuss about renal failure. Okay. In the class, I have already finished that there is a glomerulonephritis, acute and a chronic glomerulonephritis. Okay, and nephrotic syndrome. So, the part that has been left, that is the renal failure. Renal failure. Now, first of all, what is renal failure? Renal failure, that is when the kidney is unable to execute their normal function. When the kidney becomes failure to execute their normal functions. And which are these normal functions? And these normal functions are actually excretion of waste products, number one, and number two, that is to maintain the internal chemical environment. Internal chemical environment. What is that internal chemical environment? Like the blood pH, which is 7.4, and you know that if the pH is increased by 0.2 or decreased by 0.2, it would be fatal to our life. Fatal to our life. So the major function of the kidney are to excrete, to eliminate the waste products, and to maintain the internal chemical environment, like blood pH and others. So when these two major functions of the kidney are affected, then this is referred as renal failure. Okay, so this is referred as renal failure. Now, renal failure is of two types. One is known as acute renal failure, and other one is known as chronic renal failure. Acute renal failure and other one is known as chronic renal failure. Okay. First of all, we like to study that is acute renal failure. In renal failure, you know that treatment, that the physician, role of physician is most important, but nutritionist or dietitian actually plays a supportive role. That means nutritionists try to maintain the energy supply as per requirement, try to maintain the fluid balance of the body, try to maintain the electrolyte balance, so that there is no chance of toxicity due to electrolytes, especially the potassium toxicity, intoxication of potassium is not developed, fluid toxicity is not developed, okay? And the energy can be supplied. How the restriction of the protein can be maintained so that extra load imposition of the kidney can be recovered. So these are the supporting functions that are executed by the dietitians. And these supporting functions are also very much helpful for the execution of the normal efficacy of the different drugs to revive the renal activity at the normal level. Okay? So in renal failure, you may say that the role of dietitian is actually supporting role. Now, first one, that what is acute renal failure? What is acute renal failure? A sudden shutdown of renal function. Sudden shutdown of renal function due to metabolic insult. That means due to the disorders of metabolic conditions of the body. First disorders of the metabolic condition of the body. Due to the metabolic insult or traumatic injury to normal kidney. Traumatic injury to normal kidney. Such condition may result sudden shutdown of the normal function of the kidney. And there are two major normal functions that I have already mentioned. There is the elimination of the waste materials from the body, and second one, to maintain the internal chemical environment. So sudden shutdown of the normal functions of the kidney by chemical insult, by metabolic insult, or by traumatic injury to kidney. Then it results, that is the acute renal failure. Okay? And what is chronic renal failure? There is another state, chronic renal failure. That means when the patient is suffering from glomerulonephritis, that is nephrosclerosis, arteriosclerosis, renal arteriosclerosis, or arteriolorosclerosis, arteriosclerosis and arteriolosclerosis. Then it may result chronic renal failure. So first of all, we like to study that is the acute renal failure. I repeat it, acute renal failure, that is the sudden shutdown of the renal function due to metabolic insult. As for severe diabetic condition, may raise also metabolic insult of the kidney, to metabolic insult or traumatic injury to the normal kidney. Okay. Now, what are the causes of this acute renal failure? The number one, loss of blood due to accident, due to ulcer, due to internal hemorrhage. And as a result, the rate of blood flow to the kidney is diminished. And due to such arrestation of this renal blood flow, the excretion of the waste product, the fluid balance of the body would be affected, and that may lead to the acute renal failure. Number two, loss of plasma, not the total blood, loss of plasma, as in burn patient. In burn patient, you know that plasma is actually eliminated from our body through the burn space. Evaporation of plasma is also going on at a high rate to this burn zone, to this naked zone. Or due to crash injury. Crash injury, that means that is a blunt injury. Crash injury, a blunt injury. There is no bleeding, but there is actually profuse loss of tissue fluid. And that tissue fluid is actually coming from plasma. So loss of plasma. So first cause, that is the loss of blood due to accident, due to ulcer, due to internal hemorrhage, that may curtail the renal blood flow. Okay, then the renal fraction, renal blood fraction should be decreased, that the flow fraction will be decreased. Renal flow fraction, that means which portion of that total blood is transported through the renal bed. That is not the proportional blood flow to the renal bed. So that is decreased. Or number two, there is the loss of plasma. That is due to the burn case or due to the crash injury. Or number three, loss of fluid, loss of body fluid, like in diarrhea, or you may say due to the profuse vomiting, or you may say that is a diabetic coma, which is associated with excessive urination or excessive sweating. So number three cause, that is the acute renal failure, may be due to loss of body fluid in huge amount. That is developed, that is noted in diarrhea, in profuse vomiting, in diabetic coma, which is associated with the profuse sweating, or you may say profuse urination. And number four, there's the general anesthesia or surgical operation that reduce the renal blood flow. Anesthesia has a profound effect on the renal blood flow. And if this effect is noted at a severe level, it may arrest the renal blood flow so that the waste material elimination will be decreased, and that may result in acute renal failure. So anesthesia and the surgical operation, there is a shock, surgical operation, there is the internal body shock which is developed, that may curtail the renal blood flow fraction, and that also associates with acute renal failure. Number three, that is shock due to serious infection, serious life-threatening infection. Life-threatening infection, like in COVID-19, life-threatening infection, there is also acute renal failure. And it has been revealed that sometimes COVID-19 infection, the death is also coming, not only due to such infection, but due to some renal failure. Okay? There is a shock due to serious or life-threatening infection. Number Next cause, that is the acute hemolytic disorder. There is the hemolytic disorder, there is the RBC breakdown disorder. Acute hemolytic disorder. And due to such acute hemolytic disorder, the RBC degeneration or breakdown rate is increased, and that breakdown products are also accumulated in the glomerular filtering bed. That also interfere the rate of ultrafiltration, and thereby the urine formation, the excretion of the different waste products would be hampered, and that may result the acute renal failure. And next one, that the nephrotoxins, which are present in some mushrooms, as well as some drugs like paracetamol. If you consume high level of paracetamol, it has also nephrotoxic effect. And this nephrotoxic agent can interfere the rate of renal blood flow, and that may result the acute renal failure. So some mushroom, all mushrooms are not actually edible in time. Some non-edible mushrooms may result acute renal failure. Paracetamol is another drug that also may result acute renal failure. And another one that I have already mentioned, that the glomerulonephritis, nephrosclerosis, renal arteriosclerosis, renal arterio and arteriolosclerosis. If the sclerosis is noted in artery, renal artery, then this is known as arteriosclerosis. If that atherosclerosis is noted in the renal arteriole, not renal artery, but renal arteriole, then it is known as arteriolosclerosis. So arteriosclerosis and arteriolosclerosis in the renal bed is also raises the acute renal failure. So these are the causes. I repeat it in short: the loss of blood due to some accidents, ulcer, or internal hemorrhage; loss of plasma due to burn or due to crash injury; loss of fluid, diarrhea, vomiting, diabetic coma; general anesthesia or surgical operation that interfere the renal blood flow. Number 5, that is the shock due to life-threatening infection. Next one, that is acute hemolytic disorders. Acute hemolytic disorders, that is the RBC breakdown. Number next, the nephrotoxins, like some mushroom, non-edible mushroom, paracetamol, that also results in nephrotoxicity. And nephritis, that's the glomerulonephritis, nephrosclerosis, renal arteriosclerosis, renal arteriolosclerosis, etc. Okay? Now, next one, what are the symptoms of the acute renal failure? What are the symptoms? There is the anuria. Anuria, there is the absence of urine formation. Absence of urine formation. Anuria. Oliguria. Oliguria, there means a less amount of urine formation. So anuria or oliguria. And in case of oliguria, urine formation per day is about 20 ml to 200 ml only. 20 to 200 ml only. Okay, there is the oliguria. So symptoms, there is the anuria, oliguria, number 1. Number 2, serum urea nitrogen. Serum urea nitrogen. Creatinine, serum creatinine level. So serum urea level, serum nitrogen level, serum creatinine levels, all are increased. So if this level is increased, okay, then it may say that it is case of acute renal failure. As for example, urea level, if it is more than 200 mg per dl, 200 mg per dl, it indicates that it is also case of renal failure. Now, next one, that hyperkalemia. That means the potassium level in plasma, kalemia, not calcium, kalemia, Ka. So hyperkalemia, that is potassium level in blood is increased. You know that the proximal convoluted tubule, distal collecting tubule, all are responsible for potassium excretion through the urine. So if this renal function is interfered, then the potassium excretion would be decreased, and as a result, potassium would be accumulated in the blood, and it may result potassium toxicity. Because this potassium high level can able to interfere the cardiac function, and it may result heart failure. Okay, so potassium elevation in the plasma is one of the symptoms of the acute renal failure. Okay. And this potassium elevation is due to the number one, that is the less elimination of potassium through urine, and number two, that due to the glomerulonephritis, due to the nephrosclerosis, etc., the renal epithelial cells are damaged, and these are replaced by scar tissue. And due to the degeneration of these renal epithelial cells, potassium level will be increased, because you know that potassium is mainly present within the cytoplasm of the cell, within the cytoplasm of the cell. And so due to the high rate of degeneration of the cell, plasma potassium level will be increased. And renal failure is also associated with the degeneration of the renal epithelial cell. As a result, potassium level is increased. So if the question is coming that potassium toxicity is always associated with the acute renal failure, what are the reasons behind it? The number one, that at the different part of the renal tubules, the potassium excretion that has been decreased, and due to low rate of potassium excretion or potassium elimination from the renal epithelial cells, potassium level in the blood is elevated, number one. And number two, that acute renal failure is associated with the tissue damage. Maybe the renal tissue damage as well as in the non-renal tissue damage. Renal tissue damage primarily due to the renal tissue damage, and secondarily due to the non-renal tissue damage. And due to such tissue damage, that means due to the cell damage, the potassium which is confined within the cytoplasm of the cell comes to the outside, comes to the extracellular fluid, and it will be transfused to the blood, and the blood level of potassium will be elevated. So there are two reasons for high level of potassium in acute renal failure. Okay. Similarly, phosphate and sulfate level, sodium and calcium level are also altered in the plasma. Phosphate and sulfate excretion is also decreased, and thereby it also elevated in the plasma, and that also changed the internal chemical environment of the blood. Okay, so these are the symptoms of the acute renal failure. Another symptom that is known as the lethargy. Lethargy. That means due to the change in the blood pH, you know that different cellular activity, enzyme activity would be altered, and thereby the energy output would be decreased and physical efficiency would be altered. That may lead to lethargy. Anorexia is also known due to change in the blood pH and due to the change in the osmotic load of the blood. Our two centers in the hypothalamus, that is the satiety center as well as the feeding center, their balance of the satiety and the feeding center, interaction of the satiety and feeding center is not going on in proper way, and thereby the food consumption tendency to decrease. That results in anorexia. So anorexia, vomiting is also noted. Blood pressure is also elevated due to the high osmotic pressure. So blood pressure is also elevated. Second one and last one, that is the death. Acute renal failure may lead to death. It is also one of the cause of the fatality. Why? And that fatality is mainly due to the two reasons. One is known as the potassium intoxication. I have already mentioned that high load of the potassium in plasma can able to interfere the potential change of the cardiac muscles, and the heart will stop in the phase of diastole. Heart will stop in the phase of diastole. Okay. So potassium intoxication that lead to inefficiency of the cardiac activity, and it may result the heart failure. And that is the one cause of the fatality. Another cause of the fatality is that water intoxication. Water intoxication. Without considering the water elimination through urine, sometimes we are very much interested for high rate of urine formation. We also give excess fluid to that patient. And that excess fluid increases the blood volume, and that hypervolemic shock is also noted. That means high blood volume results in extra load on the heart, and that is known as a hypervolemic shock. And this hypervolemic shock is also results the cardiac arrestation. which is another cause of the fatality. So acute renal failure may lead to fatality mainly by two reasons. One is known as potassium intoxication, and other one is known as the fluid intoxication. So if the short question is coming, that acute renal failure, and these acute renal failure mainly noted in the children, mainly, but it is also noted in the adult person, but in major cases is noted in the children. And these deaths associated with the acute renal failure is mainly due to number one, that is potassium intoxication, and second one is due to the fluid intoxication. Okay. Now, next one, the dietary management of acute renal failure. We are not discussing about chronic renal failure. We mainly concentrated in the acute renal failure. Okay. I have already finished that. What is acute renal failure? What are the causes of the acute renal failure? What are the symptoms of the acute renal failure? And what is the main cause of death associated with the acute renal failure? Okay. Now, dietary management of the acute renal failure. Dietary management. Now, following are the principles on which the dietary management of acute renal failure is actually framed. What are the principles? One principle is the energy supply. Second principle is the fluid balance. Third principle is the electrolyte balance. And fourth principle, that is the protein supply to maintain the nitrogen load on the kidney. Okay, to balance the nitrogen load on the kidney. So there are four principles for dietary management of the acute renal failure patient. What are these principles? I repeat it. One principle, first principle, there is the energy requirement. Number two, there is the fluid balance principle. This is the most important because due to the fluid intoxication, it may result in fatality. Electrolyte, third principle, that the electrolyte principle, electrolyte balance principle. And in that connection, I have already mentioned that fatality is also noted due to the potassium intoxication. So electrolyte balance principle is most important. We are very much interested for acute renal failure patient from the viewpoint of fluid balance and the electrolyte balance, mainly the potassium. And third one, that is, I've already mentioned that nitrogen loading on the kidney. Nitrogen loading on the kidney should be minimized, okay? And thereby the protein supply should be restricted to some extent. So the dietary formulation of the acute renal failure patient depend on these four principles. So if the question comes that what are the principles adopted, what are the principles which are considered for the dietary formulation of the patient suffering from acute renal failure, your answer will be there are four principles which are considered by the dietitian. One is known as energy requirement principle, number one. Number two, fluid balance principle. Three, electrolyte balance principle, especially the potassium. And for this reason, renal patient, acute renal patient or chronic renal patient whatsoever, sodium potassium assessment should be performed daily, and sometimes 2 times per day, sodium potassium assessment of the plasma. And fourth principle, that is the nitrogen loading on the nitrogen loading principle. Now, first one, that energy. You know that acute renal failure patients are not able to perform any external work, okay? And so the energy supply that should be maintained up to 1,000 kilocalorie, not more than that. 1,000 kilocalorie. 1,000 kilocalorie energy per day should be supplied. Okay, and maximum energy, that is 95% of this energy, and sometimes 100% energy should be derived from carbohydrate and fat, not from protein. So protein is omitted to some extent, or very low level of the protein is provided in acute renal failure patient. Mainly energy is coming from carbohydrate and the fat, not from protein. And this energy is not more than 1,000 kilocalorie per day. Maximum 1,000 kilocalorie per day. If it is performed, if we can able to provide, suppose 700, 800 kilocalorie per day, it would be better. If this depends on the actually the reserve state of the patient, nutrient reserve state. Then if the patient is already suffering from undernutrition, and then comes to the renal failure, at that condition, you can supply 100 kilocalories. But if the nutrition status of the patient is okay, and that well-nourished individual is suffering from acute renal failure, then we can provide 700, minimum 600, not less than that, 600 kilocalorie energy. But because at that time, the carbohydrate reserve, that the glycogen stored glycogen in the liver, in the muscle, am I clear? Reserve fat in the adipose tissue can able to provide this energy. Can able to provide this energy, and in that case, we are not given extra load. Okay. So if the nutrition status is okay, then we supply 700, 800, and minimum up to 600 kilocalories per day. And if it is nutrition status is not up to the standard level, that means before acute renal failure, if the patient is already suffering from mild degree of undernutrition, moderate degree of undernutrition, then the energy supply would be increased and it would be standardized up to the 1000 kilocalories per day. If it is children, then there is a formula for this energy supply. And this energy supply is 80 kilocalorie per kilogram body weight. 80 kilocalorie per kilogram body weight plus 20% extra, plus 20%. Okay? If the body weight of the individual is suppose 6 kilo, then 80 into 6, 480 plus 20%. 20% means 480 into 20 by 100. Okay? So 80 kilocalorie, 80 kilocalorie per kilogram body weight plus 20% more. That is for children. But for adults, that is the maximum 1000 kilocalorie and minimum 600 kilocalorie. And that variation of the energy depend on the nutrition status of that patient before that acute renal failure. Next one, the protein. So protein supply in that diet of the acute renal failure patient should be computed very tactfully, very judiciously. Okay? We never give extra protein. We never give excess protein, even not a normal protein. If the patient weight is, that suppose 55 kilo or 60 kilo, we provide 1 gram per kilogram per day. But in acute renal failure, even you are not able to provide 1 gram protein per kilogram per day. Am I clear? You provide 0.6 gram, 0.7 gram per kilogram per day. Maximum 40 gram protein is supplied. Maximum 40 gram, not more than that. Total 40 gram. Whatsoever, what is the body weight? That is 60, 65, 70, whatsoever, not more than 40. Okay? Or otherwise, you calculate the body weight at the rate of 0.6 gram per kilogram, but not more than 40. Okay? If this calculation is less than 40, then you provide it. But if the calculation is more than 40, you are unable to provide that amount of protein. You restricted within 40 grams. Am I clear? And in that protein supply, you are very much judicious about the animal protein. Animal protein supply should be restricted because animal protein provide excess potassium than the plant protein. Mind that. Animal protein provide excess potassium than the plant protein. And already in acute renal failure, the individual or the patient is suffering from potassium toxicity. Potassium intoxication has been developed already. And if you give extra burden of potassium from the food source, then it creates extra burden to the body. And it may enhance the pathogenicity, it may enhance the complexity of the renal failure. So, animal protein should be restricted. So minimum animal protein would be provided. Why? So if the question is coming in acute renal failure, animal protein is restricted, justified. Then answer would be that in acute renal failure, the individual is already suffering from potassium intoxication. Due to 2 reasons I have already mentioned, that potassium excretion through renal tubule has been interfered. And second one, that is due to the damage of the renal epithelial cells as well as non-renal epithelial cells. That is due to the tissue damage. Potassium, which is confined within the cytoplasm, coming to the extracellular fluid, and ultimately it comes to the blood. And thereby the potassium intoxication is already noted. And in animal protein, the potassium level is more than the plant protein. And furtherly, the individual who are suffering from acute renal failure, the animal protein should be restricted so that we can able to minimize the potassium clearance load on the kidney. Next one, that is the carbohydrate. I have already mentioned the major source of the energy in this acute renal failure patient is a carbohydrate, 5 minutes more. And in this case, we only provide 100 gram carbohydrate per day, 100 gram carbohydrate per day. And if this acute renal failure patient is unable to consume food through oral route, then we supply 5% glucose solution, 2 liters per day. 2 liters, 5% glucose solution can able to provide 100 gram carbohydrate per day. So 2 liters, 5% glucose solution. Or if it is under tube feeding, that is the parenteral. So if it is intravenous feeding, that is the parenteral feeding, then we provide 2 liters of 5% glucose. If the individual is under enteral feeding, that is the tube feeding, then 700 ml of 15%, 700 ml of 15% glucose solution can be provided through that tube. And if the oral feeding is possible, then you supply 700 ml of 15% glucose with lime, some lime. Okay. So that you may say lime juice, so that there is no chance of vomiting. Okay. Now, fluid balance. That fluid balance is the most important principle. In adult, the fluid amount should be adjusted 500 ml plus volume of urine. That is the urine elimination, the water elimination through urine plus stool plus 500 ml by visible perspiration, that is by sweating or amount of sweating. So what is the formula? The water supply in acute renal failure, 500 ml plus volume of urine in 24 hours plus water loss through stool plus water loss through visible perspiration. That is mainly hardly 500 ml. So 500 ml plus urine. Urine is supposed 200 ml. So 500 plus 200. Am I clear? Plus stool on the basis of the nature of the stool, either semi-solid or solid, or you may say that is a very liquid stool. On that basis, you also give that is about 100 ml or 150 ml. And another maximum 500 ml for sweating. If the sweating, then you excess sweating, then 500 ml. If the sweating is minimum, then you also give 200 ml, 250 ml. So that is the total volume of water that should be, or fluid that should be provided to the patient. And that fluid volume should be maintained. Otherwise, it results fluid intoxication. And that fluid intoxication, that means if the elimination of the water through urine, through stool, through sweat is minimum, in spite of that, you also provide excess water to the body, excess fluid to the body. It may result fluid intoxication, and it may create hypervolemic shock, and that may lead to heart failure, cardiac failure. Okay. And last one, there is the potassium. We have already mentioned that potassium intoxication is already developed. So the defined potassium enriched food like tomato juice, like coffee, like tea, like coca, and all such potassium enriched food items should be omitted from the diet. So coffee, tea, coca, tomato juice, or tomato products, that should be eliminated. And I have already mentioned that animal protein should be restricted because animal protein is a high source of potassium. Okay. And if this potassium level, mind that, if this potassium level, a urea level, mind that if the urea level is more than 200 mg per day, 200 mg per day, then hemodialysis, we also take in another class on hemodialysis. Hemodialysis should be followed. That means blood dialysis should be followed if the urea level is more than 200 mg per day. Okay. And last one, that the sodium. Sodium is the important factor. If there is excess sodium load, as the sodium elimination is decreased, so there is a high chance of sodium loading, and that may result the edema. That may result edema. That may result hypertension. So hypertension and edema are developed due to the excess sodium in the blood. So in case of acute renal failure, the potassium sodium intake, that is through table salt intake, should be minimized, and not more than 1 gram per day. Not more than 1 gram per day. It is generally provided 300 to 400 mg per day. 300 to 400 mg per day. If the individual can able to consume salt-free item, it is better. Or maximally, you can able to provide 300 to 400 mg per day, but never more than 1 gram. If you provide more than 1 gram, it may result edema, and it may result, that is the blood pressure elevation, and that blood pressure elevation may result in another complications in connection with acute renal failure. So this is all about acute renal failure. 1 minute more, I repeated the points that what is acute renal failure. Number 1, number 2, what are the causes of acute renal failure? Number 3, what are the symptoms of the acute renal failure? Number 4, what are the principles adopted for the dietary management of acute renal failure? And number 5, that is the different dietary ingredients which are incorporated in the diet of the acute renal failure patient. That is the energy supply, carbohydrate, protein,